Alright, hello everybody, and welcome back to another weekend in Solo Score Rush. While we aren't quite there, it is Thursday, a little bit early, but we are getting into this first match, which will be the first of a few. I will be your commentators, No, and we'll be going over this match. It's going to be Astal versus Soundie, a pretty interesting match. I don't really know who to root for here, both being really good players, but we'll see. We're going into the roles and advance. So let's see how this will do. I kind of expect Astal to ban one of the Rice picks. Maybe something along the lines of Rice 7 maybe? Or Rice 3 I guess too. Astal is known for struggling a little bit when it does come to these Jack picks, so I think it makes a little bit of sense. Although I think something like Rice 7 might have been a little bit of a better ban, but it looks like we'll be seeing Rice 2 be banned, which I guess it's fair. I think these top Rice are probably more so these like really risky picks when it just comes to at least players of this level. But as I say, that Soundie going into Rice 1. I'm not really too sure how a match like this one will go. I'm not too familiar with Soundie when it comes to these more physical pools, especially something like this one. I guess we'll see how it goes. I do know Astal is fairly okay-ish when it comes to these Ellens on the harder side, although I don't know Soundie's performance at all, like I said earlier. I would assume Astal probably goes for these lesser physical picks and more of these Ellen picks. I don't think they'll go into the hybrids just because of the kind of physicality requirement needed for both of them. But we'll be going into Rice 1, our speed pick. This one being a little bit of a later speed pick when it comes to our other weeks. We do start off fairly tame. There's, I guess, a kind of Gracie nature that comes with this beginning part, but as we do roll into this next section, the first course, we're going to start to see these 1/8 strings, I believe, start to come in, and then you'll see some alternations between other snappings, which can make it just a little bit more difficult to kind of hold, and some of the checks as well. It tests a lot of just kind of dexterity and your flexibility when it does come to these streams. And I know Astal is rather okay when it comes to speed picks. I know on the higher end, it does become just a little bit of a struggle like we see right here. I think they're gonna want to stay away from a lot of these Rice picks given how physical it is and that they aren't the most physical player. I guess Soundie maybe being able to win this physicality battle just off the basis of what we're seeing right here. I do know that Astal does have some potential when it comes to some of these picks, so we'll kind of have to see how flexible some of these other picks are. It is the first one only, so it doesn't really tell us absolutely everything. I do know Soundie did put a really strong performance in the most recent Flash Revolution tournament in their group. I believe they did win that one, so that could be a good indicator of what to expect from them, a really strong, potentially Rice performance. Potentially we might see the Rice versus Ellen battle here, but it is a little bit too early to say. It's still struggling a lot of it when it comes to a lot of these faster streams, some of these 3-note ones included with the mini jacks, which I can't really blame her. They are a lot harder to kind of hold on to just because it gets really tight and just the kind of speed that is required to transition in and out of those mini jacks as well. And it looks like Soundie might be holding the full comp on this one, which is going to be really crazy, especially given that they did struggle a little bit in these earlier rounds when it came to consistency. But it looks like Astal just gonna struggle really badly on a pick like this one. But like I said, they do tend to struggle a lot more when it comes to these more physical picks in the Rice department. I think they might struggle just a little bit when it comes to the Ellens as well, but I don't think it'll be that bad. At least from what we see here. Thankfully, it is a 50k score maximum, so not all the damage fully done, but something like this is still really risky on the side of Astal. I mean, it just depends on how confident Soundie feels with these Ellens. I know when it comes to like the earlier game Ellens, they're pretty well rounded. I'm not too sure completely how they fare on these harder ones, but I guess this one will be a pretty good indicator. Our density pick, and a pretty awkward one as well. This one not really following the traditional format in this tournament or in other tournaments as well. I think if most people are familiar with crystalline LNs, they know about those like anchors, I guess you could say. Usually it's like 5-note rice anchors that switch between lanes. This one having that gimmick kind of, but they will be elements within the density sections, and they will be switching all around, which can be just so hard to hold onto, just because of this dexterity needed. But we'll have to see how Soundie fares when it comes to these later LNs. I know Astal is pretty well-rounded, very good at the LN accuracy side, but I can't really be certain when it comes to these more physical ones, especially in a pick like this one, which is nearly 230 BPM. I mean, we're reaching finals levels of MWC right here. It's very easy to understand why both of these players are just going to struggle really heavily. I'd honestly be surprised to see more full combos from either of these players. I mean, we see on a pick like this one, I mean, both missing just... Okay, I was gonna say just Soundie being just a little bit on that edge, but it does look like as we get into, I guess, a little bit of a more control area, Soundie's showing just a little bit. The only issue is that Soundie is still able to kind of make their way through these LN picks, which it does help Astal just a little bit, but the only issue is that I think Astal is going to be showing a lot more when it comes to some of these other rice picks, but we'll kind of have to wait and see. I mean, we aren't fully done, and this is where we start to see Soundie struggle a lot more when it comes to these patterns, but same with Astal, it's more so just being able to control your speed while also being able to maintain that accuracy, which is so difficult, especially with some of these anchors embedded onto this density part. They don't look too noticeable, potentially just because they are LNs, but I think being able to stay consistent on this one is just such a challenge. And I also do know that Astal isn't too consistent the later on we do get, so if Soundie's able to hold on to consistency, that could still be very dangerous for Astal, but thankfully for this pick, they're able to minimize some of that lead that they got earlier. I mean, you see both of them still struggling, but still good scores. A 970k and near 99. Still really strong scores, especially given the difficulty of this pool in specific. I mean, it's only going to get harder from here. Both players are just going to have to perform to the best that they can. And immediately going into LN6. Quite a bit of an interesting pick. Potentially wanting to capitalize off the physicality requirement needed from LN2, which I think a pick like this one could work quite fine. Although I do worry just about how physical Astal is, because a pick like this one requires so much consistency and physicality, as well as just being able to transition into a lot of these different sections. I mean, this is a collab between like 5 people, I believe, myself included, so it requires more transitioning skills than you might expect, especially for a song like this one. The song just being infamous, whether it be from the SV set that is ranked, or the old SV from MWC from quite a long time ago. But this is going to be the SSR version, our LN boss pick, and both of them missing on the burst. I can't blame them, that part's pretty difficult. I tend to miss on it with Mirror, but Soundie's not playing with Mirror, so we'll see. But Soundie struggling a little bit on these more kind of coordination jacks, giving them just a little bit of an edge, but we're slowly kind of transitioning out of those sections. While it's still going to be kind of like that wall-y nature, we do have a lot more movement, so it's not as coordination heavy maybe, or I guess in some ways you could argue it's less coordination heavy on one aspect, but more coordination heavy on another. But as we do get past that section, we'll just kind of have to wait and see how these other sections fare for both these players. I mean, one thing that makes this really difficult is just the fact that a lot of these LNs are just on different snappings in the ending. So it's easy to just drop a lot of grades here and there, especially when you have like a lot of these kind of mixed LN density sections with like some other types of patterning introduced like this. And I wouldn't really say there's like a clear break section in any of this at all. Like, even on a section like this is, I guess, kind of akin to a break in a timing hell. You have a lot less going on, but you still have to focus on a lot of these more difficult release aspects, which makes it just so much harder. And as we're kind of continuing through this section of the song, it's only just going to ramp up in difficulty slowly and slowly. I mean, you can see the density pick up a lot more. A lot of these patterns become just a lot more trickier to hold on to. Here we go, going into this next section. Even these transitions are so awkward to hit. Like that sudden burst of like dense, I guess, Ellen jacks. And this section right here, which it might look a little bit easy to play, but it is so hard to just stay consistent on a section like that one. And as we do kind of get through this section, we're slowly getting into a bit of a kind of stop and go section. I mean, both of these players are just not able to hold consistency on a pick like this one, and I wouldn't expect them to, just because it is so lengthy. I mean, this is an Ellen endgame pick after all. You do have to expect every player of any type to just struggle on this. You get a little bit of inverse section right here, which it's easy to just mess up on if you don't have the kind of finger control needed. And then back into this section with just a lot more kind of staggered releases with some race notes mixed in there, but we're slowly getting into the stop and go section that I think everyone is familiar with if you have heard this song before. And you know, you're gonna get a lot of these kind of denser jack patterning, very awkward transitions as well. The only good thing is that neither of these players have to deal with SB on a pick like this one, because it would make having to play this just so much difficult. But a little burst to kind of end things off, and then back into a mixture of these staggered releases as well as these just kind of angry patterns, almost akin to those timing hells that a lot of people might be familiar with. Soundie just struggling a lot with that coordination aspect, and we could see it right here. It is going to destroy that lead that he got in that first pick. I mean, even those misses from Astal just not mattering. I mean, when it came to like an earlier section, you could say that it did some damage, but when you reach a point like this, it only just lowers the total lead, but it doesn't lower the lead that's already given. I mean, good scores from both these players. I mean, a 960k on something like this is ridiculously hard to just hold on to. But we'll have to see what Soundie goes for. This his pick. I would imagine maybe something like Rice 7 or Rice 6. Just because of the kind of physicality aspect like that we saw in Rice 1. Maybe Rice... Sorry, did I say... I meant Rice 6 and 7. I don't know if I said Rice 5. I think Rice 5 could be a little bit risky, just because of the fact that it's a... I mean, I guess it could work too, but it looks like going into Rice 6. I think maybe... I mean, it's a good pick. I think Rice 7 might have been good too, just given that the ban phase is happening fairly soon. I mean, it's just one of those things where you have to decide which pick is more valuable. And I guess in this case, it is going to be Rice 6. Soundie's just going to have to be able to hold on to that combo, kind of similarly to how Rice 1 went. But we'll kind of see how that plays out. I mean, especially on a pick like this one that's pretty speed focused, especially for it being somewhat dense. I mean, you do have this beginning section, which is a little bit more on the techier side. It could favor either player realistically. It's just who has a lot more kind of, I guess, raw skill in this aspect. I mean, you start to see a lot of these fast jacks be introduced. And the first miss is going to go on to Astal, as a lot of these patterns are starting to become very transitioning, just tricky to hit overall. But we haven't even reached the main section just yet. It's just a matter of holding onto that combo and accuracy. Here we go, we're slowly getting into that little burst section, messing up both players. Not really favoring either of them. It's just a matter of being able to hit a lot of these tricky patterns, but thankfully, all of those tricky patterns are leaving fairly soon as we get into this section, which is going to focus a lot more on those density bursts and a lot of those just bash jack motions. And we can get into this little speed street section here. Neither player really struggling too much, but we are only just halfway through. I think the main difficulty aspect is just going to come from this next section where it becomes a lot more kind of jump streamy, hand streamy. I mean, we see the lead slowly going to Astal, but still neither of these players have that huge advantage. But they do get a little bit of a break, some dumps kind of coming in and out. I think the main section coming up next is probably going to be where we see that lead maybe shift over, especially as we do get this stream section with those inverse rolls. And here we go, we're slowly getting into a little bit of a more jack focused part, and I think here might be the time where Soundie might be able to capitalize, especially just because we did see Astal ban Rice 3. Potentially a pick that I guess you could somewhat familiarize with when it comes to a pick like this one, but I don't think it's going to be completely perfect just given that they do play very, very differently. And we see Soundie mess up at this ending, but here we go as we do get into this final burst of difficulty. Astal just needs to hold on, especially with the double miss coming from Soundie. Despite struggling, she's still able to get just a little bit of a score lead. Definitely going to be very important for some of these later picks. But that does conclude race 6. Both players performing really well. It just came to that ending. But just like that, we're already on the second ban phase. Very, very short picks. Even if they aren't that short, but I think we'll see. Okay, LN1 being banned makes sense. I think we might see race 6. I mean, race 7 or race 5. Maybe race 7, honestly. Yeah, race 7. I think this makes the most sense for Astal, just given the kind of physicality and consistency required. It is a little bit risky, even if she managed to win on something like race 6. I think it's still a very, very risky choice. And immediately going onto LN3, which I think works out just fine. Being on the techier side, I guess you could say in some aspects it has the little elements that LN1 has in that coordination aspect. There's a lot of tricky patterns here that require just a lot of finger control in general. And I think that's probably going to benefit Astal just a little bit when it comes to this pick in particularly. I think another pick would maybe be LN5 afterwards, although it is Soundie's pick twice in a row once we get through this one, so that is going to have to wait just a little bit. The most Soundie can really do is just minimize as much as that lead as he can, especially with how we saw LN2 go. At 50k lead once you Astal in the density pick. While this isn't a density pick, it is very, very technical, which I think might be very, very bad, but we'll see. I mean, the lead's already growing hugely at this beginning, and we haven't even gotten to the hard sections. Here we go. We're going to see a lot of these LN bursts with a lot of these really rigid snappings. Not really being a consistent battle, but more so a battle of being able to manage these bursts, almost akin to kind of stop and go, but not at all. Especially with these trills right here. I think we'll see either of them miss. Oh, Astal taking more damage on that. Ooh, this is getting interesting now. I definitely did not expect Astal to struggle on sections like these ones that I would say favor her a lot more. I mean, the lead doesn't go all the way, but Soundie being able to hold on to that section might just be what he needs. If he's able to gain just a little bit of a lead on this one, it might be able to negate what we saw on race 6. And especially given that his picks are the ones that are next, it could potentially shift it over. But here we go, we're getting into the second section. The only thing that's stopping Soundie from gaining that lead is just the accuracy. But can you really blame him when these bursts are just so difficult, not only to just hit, but hold on to accuracy? But we're slowly getting back into a session that will have those trills. So maybe that might be the area Soundie could capitalize on. But Astal's still holding a really strong accuracy when it comes to a pick like this one. So potentially she might be able to also get more of a lead, at least from here. Here we go, let's see his final burst. And Astal going to get a 16.7k lead from that. I would say kind of a scary one. I think the only thing stopping Soundie was just those misses, but even then, the only thing that's just a really big difference is just that ratio. And I'm not too surprised. I mean, we have seen Astal scores across these weeks. They've been really strong for these LNs. And even now, they're still fairly strong as well. It's just not being able to really play these difficult picks. But we'll see how these next two picks go. I assume Soundie's going to want to go for Rice 4 and Rice 5. I think the LNs are way too risky. And I was going to say, I don't know if the hybrids are a smart choice. I mean, we saw how the LNs go, and while these are hybrids, I think a strong aspect with these LNs, I mean these hybrids, is just the fact that it requires a lot of just coordination in general. But we'll see how a pick like this one goes. Maybe I'm wrong, and potentially this could be a really strong pick for Soundie. I do think that he should eventually go into Rice 5 though, if he wants to try maybe get a little bit of a lead. But we'll see, maybe this one proves wrong, and maybe hybrids are the way to go for Soundie. And here we go into Supernova. A very, very tricky hybrid, even if it's not like a techie one. This one focusing a lot on those transitions between shields and streams. I do think that something like this and Hybrid 2 do have a little bit of a bias towards Astal, just given the fact that it does rely on that finger control aspect, but we'll see. I'm just a bit worried, but I guess the good thing is that even if this goes wrong, Soundie does have another pick to go towards. Not all will be lost just yet. But here we go, as we're getting into the first course, unless Spancha wants to freeze. I think this is where we'll start to really see if that lead is actually going to go towards Soundie, especially as the later half does get a lot more harder. So far, Soundie's having a really huge accuracy lead on a pick like this one, which is very surprising to me. I would have expected a pick like this one to be a lot more risky, but I guess that miss being very bad on the side of Astal. And another one coming in. This might potentially be what Soundie needs if he wants to kind of get back on the board. As we do get into a section like this one, I think this section in particular might be just a little bit more riskier, at least for Soundie, just given that kind of coordination aspect needed. And you can kind of see it right here already be taken to place. And the fact that this goes on for quite a while is very alarming too. This part, I would say, a lot more on that kind of LN coordination side. But it looks like both these players are just going to struggle, so not too much harm done on the side of Soundie. But we're slowly getting into the second half, which does get a little bit more harder. And I think maybe if it goes just like the first half, it might just be in favor of Soundie as well. But this break section is only stopping us from seeing the true results of what will happen. Gosh, this is such a nerve-wracking moment. I mean, even like a lead like this one, it's so easy for it just to slip onto the other side completely. And here we go, we're slowly transitioning out of these jacks, but it's still a little bit of a scary game for both players. But slowly we're getting into a little harder section, and I think this is the time for Soundie to really shine. Especially as these difficult patterns are really starting to be more prevalent, and you start to see a little bit more of a kind of streamy bias. Soundie's still staying consistent. He's just going to have to hold on as long as he possibly can. I think this part is where Soundie has to stay consistent to try maximize that lead as much as possible. Especially with Astal struggling just a little bit on that physicality side, but she might be able to just hold on. And just as I say that, that lead's gonna shift more towards Soundie. And Soundie might be able to full combo this ending section, gaining here just a little bit of a lead. That 14k lead definitely being what is needed, especially given that we did see a 50k come from Ellen too, and those previous two picks not working too much in favor of Soundie. The only thing that's really left is being able to get potentially a 50k lead again. But we'll kind of have to wait and see. I mean, thankfully it is Soundie's pick next, so there's still opportunity to build a little bit of a cushion. Not too sure what the best choice would be. I guess race 4 is being chosen. I was going to say, given how Hybrid 1 went, I guess Hybrid 2 doesn't sound too bad of an idea. But I think race 5 could also be a bit of a good idea as well. Well, we'll see how this one goes. To our tech pick. I guess the only good thing for both these players is that it isn't a physical pick. Is very technical, but it definitely doesn't require the physicality requirement that a lot of these other race picks need, especially like something like race 1. So here we go into Beast. A very, very interesting pick on the side of Soundie. I think this could backfire potentially, but kind of have to wait and see. A lot of these really, really fast bursts and embedded with mini jacks too. So far, not really going to anyone. I don't think we'll see too much within this first half. It is still quite difficult, but I don't think it is the main difficulty that a lot of people are probably prompt to miss on. I mean, we see the accuracy drops every now and then, especially just because these bursts are just really fast and really sudden. You have to transition really fast, and if you don't have good transitioning skills, it's a lot easier to mess up on them. It's just one of those skills that you can't really train properly. It just kind of comes from playing a lot of different types of files in general. But this is where you're going to start to see difficulty rise just a little bit, more of that technical aspect being a lot more prevalent. See these shows, you see some of these races and these bursts as well as the mini jacks, and as we slowly get on, we're gonna slowly move into just a little bit more harder sections, and Soundie messing up as we are exiting that first tech section. The only worrying thing is just that the fact that this next section does get a little bit harder, and that is definitely not the place that you want to be missing on. Especially just given that there's so little going on. And Astal's still holding such a really high accuracy pick for something like this one, but I assume that it's gonna lower up just a little bit as we kind of transition into this next section. As you start to see these more aggressive tech patterning, layering starts to get more aggressive, as well as these mini jacks just being so fast as well. And that is where you start to see that miss coming from Astal. And like I said, this is the section where players are going to start to drop the accuracy, and this is the main section that people are going to find difficulty on. And as I said earlier, this is a pick that could have backfired for Soundie, and it looks like it's starting to backfire just a lot more. Yeah, Soundie's just missing a lot more with these mini jacks and some of these trills that just get ridiculously fast. Looks like Astal is going to be taking this one by a huge margin. Exactly the amount of points that Astal needed, especially just given that we're slowly starting to close that gap needed to end the match. There isn't really too much that can be done here. I mean, despite a miss coming at the very end, there just isn't a lot of notes left in this ending section. The only thing it's going to do is just minimize some of that lead that was gained. But it's still going to push it over that 60k lead. And this is what gives Astal that upper hand within basically this ending half of the match. I mean, especially with the LN still being intact, it's still a very, very risky position to be in, but it looks like we'll be seeing LN4 be picked right off the bat I think this is probably a really good pick as well. Just given that we did see LN1B banned, we saw how LN6 went. This one maybe not being the same as both of them, but this definitely does require that coordination aspect that a lot of these LNs need. But this one just being a little bit on the kind of consistency area, but also a bit of a niche skill set. As we move on to our LN wall pick, this is probably a good pick to go for. Although I do worry for Soundie. Here we go. This intro not really saying too much, but we're slowly getting into the first course, and this is probably where Soundie's gonna have to just be really, really careful. And here we go. We're getting into our first session. So far, both these players are still fine, but Astal just has a huge accuracy lead, even if it doesn't look like it in the scoring. But as we're kind of going through this part, Soundie's just going to struggle a little bit, which I kind of suspected would happen as we went into a pick like this one, which requires a lot of just finger control in general. I'm not too sure how Astal will do in these following sessions, but it looks like that kind of burst. Ooh, that is very, very dirty. I'm wondering what happened. It did look like a lot of those transitions got there. I guess the challenging aspect just being that you're a lot more focused on that kind of LN jack hold motion. That a lot of these bursts just coming so suddenly makes it a little bit hard to transition into those. But the only thing is that Soundie did drop their combo, so it's not going to be looking too good. Just because Astal just has that huge accuracy lead, but as we're slowly getting into this ending, potentially Soundie might be able to get a little bit of a comeback. Astal's really starting to struggle with the second half. It might just be that stamina factor really starting to be put into place. You'd have to imagine that both the stamina for both these players are starting to dwindle little by little as we go on through each of these picks, especially just with the physicality required needed for both of them. But thankfully, Astal was still able to get just a little bit of a lead. So not all is bad, but definitely struggling a little bit on that kind of consistency side. The accuracy just being really good in general, but not really being able to hold that combo too strongly, which isn't the end of the world, especially given that LN5 is our next pick. All the LNs being chosen. The only bad thing though is that the cap is starting to close off. So Soundie really needs to put in the work to make sure that they can potentially get into the final scoring. But we'll see how a pick like this one goes. Here we go into our LN speed pick. This one's going to be very, very tricky to just hold combo on and stay consistent on. The wearing factor just for both of these players, I mean, neither of them being too consistent, but it really could go either way. It's just who's able to stay consistent on a pick like this one a lot more. But Soundie's going to have to stay the most consistent for the remaining picks if he wants to still stand a chance. Here we go, as we're getting to our first course. This is where we're gonna see who really has the edge on a pick like this one. And so far, neither of them are really letting up. That accuracy from Soundie is crazy. But as we do get into this next half, it does look like both these players are still going to be struggling a little bit. There isn't really a huge lead. But as we are kind of continuing onto this section, it isn't as fast as the earlier sections, but there's still a little bit of that kind of coordination aspect needed, which is kind of natural when it comes to a lot of these LNs, which I think is the main issue that Soundie is going to be having when it comes to these LN picks in general, which we've seen from time and time again. I mean, they're able to hold on to that physicality requirement needed, but the issue is just having that finger independency and that finger control needed for all of these LN picks in general. They're still missing on that inverse section, which is interesting to see, but there is a lot of strain when this comes to these inverse sections, especially as it speeds up. But we're slowly getting into the second section. And still struggling a little bit with these transitions. We've seen her struggling a lot when it comes to kind of going in and out of these patterns, so potentially an area where Soundie might be able to potentially gain just a little bit of score, especially as we're transitioning into this next section. This is do or die when it comes to Soundie. As we get into this next speed section, we're going to see a lot of these really tricky releases being added onto these speed sections as well, making it just so much harder to hold on to the accuracy and also just hold on to that combo in general, which is what we're seeing from Soundie. That lead slowly going by. But as we do continue, it doesn't look like we'll be seeing much damage on the side of Astal. Potentially missing on these, yeah, I was gonna say potentially missing on these kind of semi-inverse sections. It's going to help Soundie just a little bit with taking away that lead, but it's not going to be enough. Especially with just how good Astal has been performing on these LNs. There just really isn't too much that Soundie could do. He did his best and banned both the LNs. No, he banned one of the LNs that he could. But I definitely do think banning Race 2 was a bit of a risky move. And we won't know what happened with Race 2, but potentially it could have played out just a little better. But going into Hybrid 2, an interesting choice. Went into our technical hybrid. The only thing I'm worried about when it comes to a pick like this one is just how Rice 4 went. We did see Soundie struggling a little bit with the kind of abrasive tech side, but I think the one good thing with a pick like this one is just that it is a lot more trickier in a physical aspect as well though. I believe this is Soundie's last pick. Yeah, this is the last pick coming from both players. So potentially things could switch over, but I'm not too sure. I wouldn't say this pick is the most physical pick, especially compared to someone like Astal, who's able to kind of go through these hybrids somewhat fine, but we'll see. Although we did see how Hybrid 1 went, so potentially it is also maybe an area that Soundie can capitalize off of, but needing a 42.8k lead is going to be a very, very rough challenge. Especially with neither of these players being that consistent. But here we go. This is the only time Soundie really has to make a chance. And as we're starting to get into these really dumpy sections, fun with some mini checks as well, it does not look too good for Soundie. I think a pick like this one might have been just a little bit too risky, especially with... Okay, never mind. But still a really risky pick. I mean, potentially it could work out, but so far it's not looking too good on the side of Soundie. Astal just putting in the work, trying to make sure that they can hold on to as long as they possibly can. I mean, even despite that, that lead is slowly shrinking as we do get into kind of a little bit of a slower section with these 1/3 jacks coming in. They're going to be a little bit hard to coordinate. Looks like Soundie's still going to be able to hit that though. I did worry a little bit just because we did see Soundie struggling a little bit in that coordination aspect. But here we go, as we're getting into this final course. This is the only chance Soundie has, as things are going to ramp up, and once it's over, it is over. But here we go, as we do get into this final section, more of these dumps, more of these mini jacks starting to get cluttered in. Soundie looking like they mess up and just messing up just a lot more. Just that aspect of harder files where if you mess up once, it's so easy just to mess up on so much more of these areas. And as we do get into this ending, there isn't really too much that Astal can mess up on. Soundie is struggling in that coordination aspect. One aspect that I was worried about in that earlier section, just coming to bite them back at the very end. And as things end, Astal is going to be getting a 26k lead from this. A very, very strong performance from them, not only in this pick, but in this match in general. Struggling just a little bit, but still making it through. Soundie as well, just putting a good performance, but unfortunately it is not going to be enough. And Astal is going to be taking this match and moving on to the next match in the semifinals. Losers going against Mini Egg. Definitely going to be a tough challenge for them, but we'll see how they're able to hold on. And unfortunately, Soundie will be dropping out of this tournament. But making it to semifinals, still a really, really impressive job, especially with just how much more difficult this pool is just getting and the opponents that they had to face. So a good job to both players. And a good job to Astal. We'll have to see how they perform in their next match. If they want to secure a chance in finals, although in the losers bracket, so a lot is going to happen within that losers bracket. But that will conclude this match. The next match going to be on Saturday, so definitely a little bit while to the next match. A lot less matches, so definitely be on the lookout for these matches when they do happen. You do not want to miss them at all. But with that, I've been your streamer and commentator Snow, and I will catch you all next time. Goodbye.